Good evening, the hour being 7:32. I'd like to call the June 30th, 2020 School Committee meeting to order. No pledge of allegiance due to the Zoom meeting. What I'd like to do is, let's do a roll call of who's in attendance. Mr. Ahern?
Here.
Mr. Breen?
Here.
Mrs. Zyrick?
Here.
Mrs. Denizio?
Here.
Mrs. Gallivan?
Here.
Mrs. Gayotzis?
Here.
And Mr. Buckley.
Present.
Okay, I'd like to start by request.
One more.
Oh, are we missing?
Mr. Ahern.
Oh, I did, Mr. Ahern. He was there, I called his name.
I'm sorry.
He was actually the first one.
Sorry.
We'd like to congratulate and welcome aboard to the school committee, so congratulations, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to start by requesting a nomination for from the floor for chairperson. Do I have a nomination?
Through you, Madam Chair, I make a motion to nominate Nancy Gallivan for chairperson.
Okay, motion by Mr. Buckley, and who's the second? Sorry, I didn't see that. Mrs. Zyrick. All in favor, let's do a roll call. Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Mrs. Zyrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Denizio?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Gayotzis?
Yeah.
Mr. Buckley?
Aye.
Okay, we have 700. Sorry, I'm just gonna mute, I just have some background noise. I'd like to ask, we have the roll call vote, and then I'd like to ask, request for the nomination for vice chairperson. Do I have a nomination? Mrs. Gallivan's nominating.
I'd like to nominate Bill Buckley as
Okay.
the vice chair.
All right.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to nominate Mr. Buckley by Mrs. Gallivan, second by Mrs. Denizio. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
Mrs. Zyrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Denizio?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallivan?
Yes.
Mrs. Gayotzis?
Yes.
And Mr. Buckley.
Aye.
That's 700. I'd now like to thankfully turn it over to Mrs. Gallivan, that I don't have to do a roll call anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. We'd like to start this meeting with a moment of silence on behalf of the passing of former members of the school committee, Mr. Bill Powers and Mr. Mike Iwanowitz. So just for a moment, let's request a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. First of all, I just think on behalf of the committee that we would all like to thank Mr. Buckley for a tremendous amount of leadership as our outgoing chairperson. Bill, you did yeoman's work, and we really, really appreciate it. And at the same time, thanks, Bill. At the same time, would like to thank Beth Muccini for tremendous contributions. And one of the good things about this committee is we tend to remain friends forever. So thank you to Beth, and we really appreciate the work that she's done. And as Dr. Goff said, we welcome a new member tonight, Sean Ahern. And Sean, I just hope that you find it as fulfilling as we have. It's a tremendous responsibility. It's a crazy, unusual time, but welcome to the team. I'm sure that we'll all be glad to help you out in whatever ways you need, and I hope it's the start of a good experience for you.
Thank you very much. It's quite an honor to be here. Look forward to working with you all. You end all your meetings with smiling faces, so look forward to that continuing to be the case.
There you go. There's a challenge for us. Huh. Okay, getting into this is going to be a short meeting this evening. The first order of business is Mary has included subcommittee assignments in our packet, and that is really just an FYI. If people take a look at that and want to move from one subcommittee to another, or are interested in something that's open, just give me a call or an email or a text, and we'll address it at one of our upcoming meetings. Does anybody have any questions related to that right now? Okay, then this is a little challenging, Bill, to do the Zoom stuff. You have to remember.
No kidding.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, you felt like I was bad at this.
Okay, so the next item is a follow-up to the change of the rebel name. Do you want to start this off, Bridget, or do you want me to?
No, you can take it, Nancy, that's fine.
Okay, the first two items that we've put into place are, we want to make sure that we get information out about the Commission on Renaming the high school name, and we also want to get information out about a fundraising working group. And Mr. Buckley and I have been in touch with Stephen Imbush, who will be the person who will be the point person on the Commission for Renaming. And the suggestion that he had was to put together a process where anybody who has any sort of connection to Walpole High School can apply to be on this commission. And it's a few questions that you need to answer, and then in fairly short order, people will be hearing back from Mr. Imbush. The chances are that more people will probably apply than can be put onto a manageable size committee, but he will get that information and try to have a meeting of this group sometime in the very near future. What we're talking about, what we suggested is that we would get, the school committee would get regular reports back from this commission, just to stay in touch. But what am I missing on that, Bill?
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I know Steve is eager to begin this endeavor, and what we want to kind of point out that a lot of the central office staff are focused, rightfully so, on reopening, and this is something now that is moving into the realm of a high school led by the high school administration and the athletic director, and we just want to give people the opportunity to volunteer. I know there's a I've been thinking more about the booster athletic piece, which I know you're going to speak to.
But why don't you talk about that now, Bill? Go ahead.
I think, yeah, I know, in communicating with Steve, I think there's an interest in the next week or so, like as a first step, to really gather with coaches and booster presidents and get everyone on the same page. I know there's since our last meeting, there's been a number of questions arising about really the mechanics of this. Questions about do we have to get rid of everything right now, or are we phasing things out? And what about many of these booster groups have kind of set fundraisers that are cyclical and yearly, and so I think on that piece, I would say that probably the best thing to do is to have a few of us gather with the boosters and coaches and kind of get a starting point, and then likewise gather people in the community who are interested in helping leverage private funds and fundraising, and maybe some folks who are not necessarily connected in with the high school athletic sort of world, but have great kind of skills at fundraising and things of that nature, so that we can kind of pair folks who have a long history of supporting Walpole High School athletics and being being involved with maybe some new energy and people with new ideas about how to move forward. But I think that again is something we want to put in the sphere of being really run through and by the athletic director and the principal, and both of these initiatives are continuing to be ones assisted by the school committee, but they sort of live at the high school as opposed to like the central office level, which I know there was some community concerns about, like time spent on this, and it's an important piece to underscore. Probably missed some stuff too.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think that the initial attempt is that the athletic director is currently reaching out to representatives from each of the sports for a coach and a parent to try to attend a meeting. If I have it right, I believe he's aiming for the week of July 6th through the 11th. And if that doesn't work, he would go to the next week. But getting at least one of the two, but ideally a coach and a parent from each of the sports to attend a meeting. And I know that there was a woman who sent us an email the very next day after we voted to change the name, and she had a connection to some corporate people. So there are people beyond this that have an interest in joining in. But I think the first step is to just get consistent information to everybody at the sports level. I know that the high school newspaper had a meeting with their executive officers, and they're interested in joining in a name change as well. I think that, there'll be other places where people are going to want to join in to keep the communication ongoing. But one of the things that Bill and I were making sure that we conveyed to Steve Imbush is that in addition to all these high school related people communicating, that we want some regular communication coming back to all 7 of us on the school committee. So that's what we have asked for. We'll let you know if and when a meeting gets set up with the parents and the boosters, and Steve's going to get going starting tomorrow on recruiting people for the Commission on Renaming.
Yeah, through you, Nancy, I think it's similar to another one of our subcommittees where we might take the reports a little earlier or later in the agenda, but I think we all would we want to use these school committee meetings as another vessel to get information and updates out to the community on top of Twitter and Facebook and the superintendent's emails and the school committee summaries.
Great. So are there questions or comments from the rest of the committee? I guess the one thing that I would add, in case people were not listening to our meetings that happened on the week of June, it was the 16th and the 18th, where we heard testimony and then we spoke about the need to change the Rebel name. The decision has been made that the Walpole High will not be considered the Rebels any longer. But what we also realize is that we don't have the finances to commit to this change immediately. We're not expecting parents to fundraise for brand new uniforms over the summertime. On the other hand, we are expecting that if new uniforms are being ordered, that they will not have the name Rebel on them. But we're not passing this burden on to the Boosters Club, and that's one of the things that I think people who listened to us during that week understood. But I think the people that weren't tuning into our listening audience still have a bunch of questions. So we just want to kind of clarify it.
If I
Yes.
May, through you, just a comment, kind of what Bill said, to reinforce that, this is one of the mechanisms that our entire community has access to. So the more that we can use this channel of our meetings to go out, like the superintendent letters, it goes out to our districts, but the entire community is invested in this. So developing a channel to, push that information through and get their support and continue to encourage them to be plugged in will be important.
Thank you. Exactly right. Any other questions or comments? If not, that'll get us to the next item, which is a huge topic of DESE fall opening guidance. And Dr. Goff is willing to give us the introduction tonight. Obviously, it's just an introduction. We're not expecting all the answers, but it's all yours, Dr.
Thank
Goff.
you, Nancy. This will be I have two parts to my superintendent report, and this is the first part, so it'll transition right in, but I'll pause for any questions or comments people may have about the initial guidance. So as you know, last Thursday, Governor Baker's office and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education released their initial guidance about reopening schools this fall. And you all should have a copy. I believe it's a 28-page document. And similar to this guidance, our goal is to safely return as many students as possible to in-person learning. So we've started, and over the coming days and weeks, we'll be reviewing this guidance along with any new guidance that the commissioner provides to us to really understand how this is going to impact what we can do at Walpole Public Schools. We acknowledge that these initial guidelines do not address every topic, and as I mentioned, there'll be additional guidance coming throughout the summer. The full document is on the district website, but just a few key components. Current medical research does support a safe in-person return to school with preventative measures in place, as infection and transmission rates are lower for children than adults. These preventative measures include masks or face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing, and cleaning frequently touched surfaces. Those mask and face coverings are going to be required for all students in grades 2 and above, and for all adults. They are recommended, the students grades 1 and below are not required to wear them. And also, based on the current medical research and in conjunction with other preventative measures, a minimum physical distance of 3 feet has been established. So what the charge is from the commissioner is that all districts will be required to develop, we have to submit 3 separate plans, ranging from students returning to full person instruction with the safety requirements, 1 plan for the hybrid learning model that combines in-person and remote learning, and then a 3rd one for remote learning. But however, based on the current medical situation, the expectation today emphasizes students returning to full in-person instruction as the primary objective. However, we do know that it's subject to change based on how the medical situation develops. But we just have to be ready to turn and pivot when that guidance is given, hence having to create these 3 plans. We do know, as Nancy mentioned, there'll be a lot of questions at this time, and we'll continue at central office to update school committee as the planning continues. And you all, like I said, have the full document available to you. A couple of other things that upon release of this guidance, it was released on Thursday morning. We had hard copies in our hands, and we had our LC retreat that Thursday, fortunately, so something worked out for us. And so we were able to spend a lot of time really dissecting, reviewing the guidance, and seeing how that might change our work with our advisory teams, because we've already had our advisory teams in place. And our advisory teams are by level. If you remember, elementary, middle, high school, special education, and then we have transportation and food service. So we had already started that before this guidance came out, and we spent a lot of our leadership retreat taking a look at the guidance, digesting it, and then how we were going to move forward with these guidelines. Because with every technical decision you make, there are adaptive challenges that follow. So we needed to discuss those adaptive challenges. Last week, and this is important, we sent a survey through Mary Mortali, surveying families. And we really would like as many families as possible to complete the survey. So far, we've had a little bit, I believe, Bill, over about 600 responses. Mary's going to send another one out, but check your emails. Just another one to remind people if they haven't completed the survey. Again, this is an initial survey, and there will be more surveys to follow, but this gives us a baseline. So please, there's a request for as many families to complete this. We're working through these issues. We know it's unprecedented times, and it takes a great deal of time, patience, and planning among all of us. And again, it's developing those 3 plans, and like I said, we need to be ready to switch and pivot when needed. So I don't know if there's any questions that I can try to answer or let you know what's going to be forthcoming. We have been meeting weekly with the commissioner. I have been meeting with my superintendents groups. We're a member like the Tri-County Roundtable and the tech superintendents. So we've been meeting with them. Principals have been meeting with their job alikes. Assistant superintendents, job alikes have been meeting, and even our school business administrators and our special ed administrators have been meeting with their job alikes as well.
Are there questions for Bridget at this point?
Through you, I would just like to commend you on the survey, getting it out so early in the game, and such a thorough survey. I've really appreciated that. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thanks to Bill for his help on with that as well.
Bridget, you mentioned that you were urging people to turn them back in. Did you put a due date on it, or are you just saying to people tonight, as soon as possible?
Yeah, as soon as possible. I think with work with Mary and the second notice, we'll put a deadline on it. I mean, we've been pleased with the response, but if we can get as many, and it ranges. It has questions asking families about transportation, returning to school, their feedback on remote learning. A second round asking for feedback. So it's a short survey. I promise it won't take long.
And just out of curiosity, were you surveying staff yet, or is that another step?
That'll be a later time, and we've been in close communication with the union, who has been great. So we'll continue to communicate with them.
Carrie, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that I'm glad to hear that more surveys are going to be forthcoming, because I noticed when I was filling it out, there was an option for a lot of questions to say I'm not sure, and that option needed to be there because there's so much uncertainty for families. They don't know if they are going to have to go back into their workplace. They don't know if their childcare arrangements that they relied upon before are still going to be there. So my suspicion is that when we review the data now, we're going to see a lot of those I'm not sure responses. And so I think it's really important for us to check back in at various points going forward as people start to gain more clarity around what the fall is going to look like for them, not just in terms of sending their children to school, but other aspects of their life that sort of affect the logistics of all of this for them.
That's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because Bill and I had discussed that, to put the I'm not sure, because the guidance will change. So as we know more and as parents know more, it's what they feel comfortable with. And I do know that the American Association of Pediatrics will be doing more and more of a PR, reaching out to families to talk to them about their options and their choices and what their recommendations are. And right now they're recommending for students to return to school.
Yeah, and there's been, a lot of positive news, I think, in the last week in terms of where Massachusetts stands in terms of the spread of the disease and containment and, new cases and deaths, et cetera, which has been great. And I think it's doing a lot to inspire more confidence among people about reopening schools. And so we'll have to pay attention to that trend as well. If more news along those lines comes in, or if the trajectory changes at all, that will definitely have an impact on, I think, parents' comfort level and their level of certainty about what they want to do in the fall or what they're comfortable with.
And the principals have been working long hours. They've been going into the schools since we met on Thursday, Friday, Monday, and today, working with custodians, measuring classrooms. They have to, pull a lot of furniture out of classrooms, looking at what they need to order. That's been going to Mike. Mike has been ordering materials that we need, through our COVID relief fund. So we're through the state. So that's been helpful as well.
Sean?
Are you guys, the principals, feeling comfortable that given the spatial requirements, if all students were to return, they would all be able to fit for the most part? So
far, they're measuring and they're taking a look at what their maximum number would be. And even if we have to, if one class, for example, is a little bit smaller, depending on that class size, even if we have to maybe switch classrooms or go to different classrooms, looking at where that overflow would be, they're confident, but we still have to just make sure that we measure everything to be sure. For example, Mike and I are going down to Boyden tomorrow, and then we'll be at the high school taking a look.
Mark?
Yeah, it's kind of a mess at the high school level, I would think. I know it is at King Philip in terms of class sizes and how many kids per room, and how do you find enough rooms of class sizes drop. I think the goal at King Philip is 20 max in a classroom. I don't even know if you could fit that many in some of the rooms, so it's going to be interesting.
It's amazing what you can fit when you take a lot of the furniture out of the rooms. I mean, it's not ideal,
right?
But if we can fit another person in there safely, that's what we want to do. Any other questions before I move on to the second item of the superintendent's report? Okay. So several weeks ago, Bill Hahn and I wrote a letter to the Walpole educational community sharing our support to recognize that as a school system, we can do better. And in that letter, we committed to assessing our own cultural knowledge, valuing diversity through the inclusive practice of all people and cultures, managing the dynamics of difference by including multiple perspectives, and teaching others about the dynamics of cultural interactions and institutionalizing cultural knowledge through our daily practice and policies. Since that time, we have heard our students, families, and broader community express strong interest to ensure that we follow through with our commitment to actively identify and challenge individual or systemic acts of racism within our schools. We know that we must shift and expand our work from celebrating diversity and inclusion to more actively becoming an organization that is committed to anti-racism, equity, and social justice. While recognize that being in the midst of a pandemic puts some constraints on what we pursue in the short term, tonight we want to clearly communicate what actions we have taken and will take as we transition to fall opening. Our hope in sharing this information is to recognize the importance of transparency with this work and to welcome the continued input from our community. 1, as we have already discussed this evening, we have eliminated the Rebel mascot name, and we will work as a community to identify a name that is inclusive and represents our school and greater community. 2, at our most recent leadership retreat that I just mentioned on Thursday, school and district administration changed one of our educational goals to emphasize our commitment to cultural proficiency. We have drafted a plan that includes professional development for all school leadership and representatives from every school to be further trained in anti-racism, equity, and social justice throughout the next school year. 3, our educational leaders will all participate in an introduction to Courageous Conversation training this summer with the Courageous Conversation Academy. This training is an experience that equates individuals with a set of tools known as the protocol to engage, sustain, and deepen dialogues about race. This initial training with courageous conversations guides an exploration of the life impact of race and promotes an essential literacy and consciousness to examine our personal, professional, and organizational ways of being. Introduction to Courageous Conversation will be a good start for WPS to enhance any effort to promote racial equity. 4, all K-5 literacy purchases done this spring and summer to support the Lucy Calkins curriculum that is implemented at all elementary schools was done deliberately to represent our diverse student population and diverse readers. We will continue to evaluate our K-12 curriculum to ensure that it reflects equitable resources, materials, and pedagogy. 5, this summer, we will develop an anonymous reporting system to allow us to better collect information about incidents of bias, including microaggressions, discrimination, bullying, and harassment, as an important first step to creating a more open dialogue with our students, staff, and community around the issues students and staff experience in our schools. 6, we will re-examine our strategic plan to ensure it aligns with our leadership goals and needs of our district, race, equity, and social justice. 7, we will continue to offer professional learning during new staff orientation that will support our novice teachers to recognize, respond to, and stop incidents of bias, racism, and microaggressions, and encourage those tough conversations around race, bias, and social justice from preschool through grade 12. And 8, we will continue to offer our Understanding Identities course to all Walpole Public School staff. This course is designed to engage educators in safe and honest conversations about identity, specifically race, gender, and sexuality, ultimately empowering all of us to impact systemic change. So we understand that our work ahead is greater than the commitments and plans that we have outlined. During this pandemic, we are committed to working with stakeholders to develop long-term goals and actions. And as many of my colleagues have said, this work is a marathon, not a sprint, and we know that we will have your support in joining us. So thank you. And that's all I had, those two
Well, that sounds like
items.
two heavy pieces of work. Are there questions or comments for Bridget? Carrie?
Just a comment, not a question. I just want to applaud you, Bridget and Bill, for being so thoughtful about how we move forward as a district and recognizing that, you know, the change of the mascot name was a really important step for the district to take, but by no means the most important or the one with the most impact, and that there's so much work to do on a lot of levels. And I'm really personally pleased with what you've laid out, and I will certainly do whatever I can to support the work that you're doing and that our administrators and teachers are doing. Like you said, it takes a long time to do this comprehensively and effectively. So I don't think anybody's expecting a complete transformation overnight, but it's nice to see that steps have already been taken and that they're going to continue to get prioritized. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I would just add to what Carrie had to say. I think that at this point, to not address the topic of equity and what you have in mind is would be a mistake. We need to own the fact that there are goals about doing better. I think we have to balance that though with the reality that there are an awful lot of things on your plate, and I'm just saying this more for the general public than for the school committee. I think that we are supportive and will be supportive, and there will be times where you just have to prioritize the the basics of operating the district, and we may not get everything done on the schedule that you put in place, but I think that's going to be the theme for this coming school year, that, be ready to be adaptable. But this is a great focus, and thank you for sharing it with us this evening. Any other comments for Dr. Goff on any part of her superintendent's report? Okay, if not, that gets us to, there's no old business, subcommittee activity. The only thing that I had was that the legislative action that we took 2 weeks ago has gained a great deal of momentum. As of today, there were 108 other school districts that had signed on to that same resolution, and I forwarded something from the MASC listserv to everybody right before this meeting. But they're suggesting a potential press release. I think we did one 2 weeks ago, so we may want to just leave it at that, or we may want to put out another press release. And the topic of this resolution was that school districts need the support from the state government to pay for the COVID-related costs of opening school in the fall, and of the ongoing costs of education throughout the school year next year. And I know that a number of us have heard back from some of our legislators about the work that they're doing on this, and the fact that so many school committees are signing on to the same piece of legislation, I think means that it's getting some traction on Beacon Hill. I was talking with Bill Buckley today, and on July 15th, we probably will begin to hear about state revenue, because that's the new deadline that for people to file their taxes. And I think fairly soon after that, we'll hear something about the state budget, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly. Would you agree with that, Bill?
Agree, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's wonderful that the legislature kicked off the tax deadline for a few months for those who are struggling, but generally the people who are getting a refund get them in on time, and the folks who need extra time and who owe the state money take longer. So when we get final numbers to that, I think that'll hopefully drastically, but probably significantly change that overarching consensus revenue number and the $6 to $7 billion hole they're currently projecting. So that's one of the pieces that gives more clarity. And it's, I mean, just for like the folks at home, it's just like the activity we do with our own budget. We're looking at indicators where they're trying to use as many concrete examples and factors to pinpoint where their local aid numbers will come in. And so I think real serious questions around that, I think both at the state and federal level, once all the tax returns come in, will begin to happen. I think hopefully maybe some budgetary action. So as we're going into August, you may actually know what the state aid number will be. But I think that's a very important road post, definitely.
Are there any other questions or comments about that or anything related to subcommittees? If not, then we are on warrants, donations, and minutes. Does anybody have the warrants? Go ahead, Karen.
I will make a motion to approve the following accounts payable warrants from June 11th, number 220050, from June 18th, number 200, I think it's supposed to be 220051, and from June 25th, number 220052, for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second, for the last time, Gary.
We have a motion by Mrs. Denizio, a second by Mr. Buckley. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, I will do a roll call. Mrs. Gayotzitz?
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Mrs. Syrak,
Yes.
Mrs. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
and Mr. Ahern.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Keep going, Carrie.
Okay, I will. Do you want me to go to minutes because there are no gifts?
Oh, there was no payroll there? I thought-
No payroll. Nope.
Okay, even easier. Then, yeah, if you don't mind, please.
Sure.
Thank
Yep. I will make a motion to approve the following meeting minutes from the community forum meeting on June 16th and the regular school committee meeting minutes for June 18th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Denizio, a second by Mrs. Syrak. By roll call, I'm going to start in the opposite direction. So, Mr. Ahern,
Abstain.
Mrs. Denizio,
Yes.
Mrs. Syrak,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Mrs. Gayotsitz,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
and Mrs. Gallivan, yes. I don't think I voted the last time. I'll get this figured out. But I voted, I say yes.
It's harder than it looks.
It is harder. And I'm not good at having two screens going. It's much
Right.
harder. Okay, that being said, I think we've gotten through this meeting. So, Mr. Breen, where are you?
Right here, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Breen, a second by Mr. Buckley. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Don't swear now, Nancy.
Okay, have a good night, everybody. And as Dr. Goff explained, we will stay in touch regularly throughout the summer to keep people updated. That's
Done.
a commitment. Thank you very
Done.
much.
Just to clarify,